Hello and welcome to everyone. Myself, Dr. Gausia Bashri from the Department of Botany, Aligarh Muslim University. Hello and welcome to everyone. Myself, Dr. Gausia Bashri from the Department of Botany, Aligarh Muslim University. We embark on a journey through the fundamental concepts and principles that underpin the art. We embark on a journey through the fundamental concepts and principles that underpin the artistry and functionality of creating stunning outdoor spaces. Landscape design is the art of arranging the features of landscape in a way that is both aesthetically pleasing and functional. In today's session, we learn about different elements of landscape designs. Before proceedings toward elements of landscape design, it's important to know why landscape design is needed. As we earlier discussed, that landscape design is the practice of creating a plan to make the best use of available space in the most attractive manner. And a landscape designer apply elements and principles of landscape design to bend and a landscape designer apply elements and principles of landscape design to blend man's technology that is house and buildings into the natural surroundings. How a designer creativity combines plant materials and other design components into a simple unified scheme is always an exciting challenge. To work toward a desirable landscape design, the landscape designer must have a working knowledge of art elements and design principles. That's why today we learn about different elements of landscape design. There are many different elements that can be incorporated into landscape design, but some of the most important include color, line, form, texture, and scale. These elements are never independent of each other, but we will discuss their individual natures before considering the interactions. Moving forward toward the first element of landscape design, that is line. Line are a powerful tool for designer because they can be used to create an infinite variety of shapes and forms, and they control movement of the eye and the body. The concept and creation of a line depends upon the purpose of the design and existing pattern. In the overall landscape, the line is inferred by bed arrangement and the way these beds fit or flow together. In this figure, we see that common landscape lines including bed lines, hardscape lines, path line, sword line, and fence lines. The line is also created vertically by changing in plant height and the height of a tree and shrub canopies. A line in a small area such as entrance or privacy garden is created by branching habits of plant, arrangement of leaves and or sequence of plant material. Straight lines tend to be forceful structure and stable and direct the observer's eye to a point faster than curved lines. Curved or free-flowing lines are sometimes described as smooth, graceful, or gentle and create a relaxing, progressive, and moving and natural feeling. These are mainly four line direction. There are mainly four line direction. Vertical lines moves the eye up, making a space feel larger. Vertical line in the landscape include tall, narrow plants material such as trees or tall structures such as arbor or birdhouse on a pole. Horizontal lines move the eyes along the guard. Horizontal lines move the eyes along the ground plane and can make a space feel bigger. Low lines are more subdued and create a feeling of rest or repose. Horizontal line can especially divide eye space or tie eye space together. Diagonal line dynamically energetic, causing more eye movement, use sparingly. Curved lines suggest motion but are softer, more comforting. In this image, we can see the curved line that suggests motion. The next element is form, which is found in the both hardscapes and plants. And it is typically the dominant visual element that especially organizes the landscape and often determine the style of a garden. Plants create form in the garden through their outlines or silhouettes. But form can also be defined by a void of negative space between plants. The form of structure, plant beds, and garden ornaments also determine the overall form. The form structure, plant beds, and a garden. The form structure, plant beds, and garden ornaments also determine the overall form theme of the garden. Different tree forms are used for visual appeal, but the form is also important for function. Creating a shady area in the garden requires a round or oval tree, while a screen usually requires a more columnar or pyramidal form, and a weaving tree form make a good focal point. For example, a plant that is very For example, a plant that is very fastigate or upright in its habit of growth, it's said to have a vertical or aspiring form like Ginjo biloba. Other plants that are spreading in their habits of growth are said to have a horizontal or spreading forms. Other plants that are spreading in their habit of growth are said to have a horizontal or spreading form. An example of this form is Texas X media, that's also known as Heliu, and a example of this is tree which is Quercus polystris, that is also known as pin oak. The Helios could be effectively used as a hedge to provide a special definition between two properties. When horizontal forms are placed together, as in the case of in the hedge, the individual vertical forms take an horizontal profile like we can see in this particular image. Weeping is a form can also be used to create softer lines or as an interesting accent in the garden. Like in this figure, we can see that Fagus sylvestica, that is also known as purple fountain or purple fountain beach in this particular form. The next form of the plant, that is shrub forms, and the other the next two forms of the plants are shrubs forms and ground cover forms. Shrub include upright, vase-shaped, arching, mounding, rounded, spiky, cascading, and irregular shapes. Choosing shrub forms often depends on whether the shrub will be used in a mass or as a single specimen. Mounding and spreading shrubs look best as a mass, and cascading and vase-shaped shrubs do well as specimen plants. The groundwater forms include matting, spreading, clumping, sprawling, and short spikes. Almost all ground cover look better in masses because they are typically small. Ground hugging plants, they have a very little impact as a individual plants. Form is very powerful because people can often Form is a very powerful because people can often recognize and identify a feature based on an outline or silhouette. People can often perceive a form when only a portion of it is visible. Familiarity and the suggestion of form is enough for eye to fill the rest. Repetition of form is essential to the creation of pattern, which is the basic organizational structure of the landscape. Form is also primary determinant of formal or informal garment. Form is also the primary determinant of formal or informal garden. Geometric form with straight edges are typical of formal garden based on that are based on an established style, such as contemporary or Italian garden. And an informal garden has more naturalistic organic forms that are normally found in gardens that mimic nature. Form compatibility is also a major component of unity in design. One or two strikingly different forms are good for contrast and emphasis, but generally, all other forms should have some similarities or for a unified look. The next component, the next element of landscape design is texture. Texture refers to how a coarse or fine the surface of a plant or hardscape material. Texture is used to provide variety, interest, and contrast. The plant's foliage, flowers, bark, and overall branching pattern all have texture. The size and shape of the leaves often determines and the size and shape of the leaves often determines and perceived texture of the plants. A plant can generally be described as having coarse, medium, or fine texture. Coarse texture is more dominant than fine and also tend to dominate color and form. While fine texture is more subordinate to the other qualities and tend to unify compositions. Coarse texture plants attract the eye and tend to hold it because the light and dark contrast of the shadows provide more interest. Fine texture exaggerate distance and give the feeling of a larger, more open space. Rough texture minimizes distance. Plant appears closer and space feel smaller or enclosed. Texture is also found in the hardscape including on blind. Texture is also found in the hardscape including on building, patios, walls and walkways. In this figure, we can see there are three different types of forms, that is coarse, medium and fine. Coarse plants, coarse plants have a larger leaves, medium has a medium size while fine have a very fine textured leaves. Plant characteristics that create coarse texture include large leaves, leaves with very irregular edges, bold, deep veins, variegated colors as we can see in this particular figure, thick twigs and branches, leaves and twig with spines or thorns, and bold, thick or irregular forms. Each leaf of a coarse texture plant breaks up the outline, which gives the plant a looser form. Examples of plant with coarse texture include philodendrons, agaves, bromeliads, hollies, palms. Hardscape with coarse texture include rough cut stone, rough finished brick, and unfinished wood. Hardscape with coarse texture includes rough cut stone, rough finished brick, and unfinished wood with knots and a raised grain. Aged or old construction material that maintains a weather beaten surface is often coarse in texture. In this particular image, we can see rough stone which creating a hardscape of the. In this particular slide, we can see the plant. In this slide, we can see the hard stones make the hard. In this slide, we can see the rough stones make the hardscape of a garden. Most plants are medium texture in that they cannot be described as having either coarse or fine texture. They are characterized by medium-sized leaves with simple shapes and smooth edges. The average sized branches are not densely spaced not widely spaced, and the overall form is typically rounded or mounding. Medium texture plant act as a background to link and unity. Medium texture plant act as a background to link and unify the coarse and fine texture plants. Plant with medium texture include Ardisia, Camellia, etc. Hardscape with medium texture include standard flagstone, pavers, broom, or concrete. Characteristics that create the fine texture include small foliage, thin, strappy leaves, or tall, thin stems, tiny, dense twigs and small branches, long stems, as in case of vines, and small, delicate flowers. They are often described as wispy and light or with a sprawling vining form. Fine texture plants sometimes have a stronger form because the small individual leaves are densely packed, as in case of boxwoods. To create a solid edge, fine texture plants sometimes have a stronger form because the small individual leaves are densely packed to create a solid edge. Plant with fine te- Plants with fine texture include grasses, fern, as we can see in this particular image, Japanese maples, many vines, and junipers. Hardscape with the fine texture includes smooth. Hardscape with fine texture includes smooth stone, wood, or ceramic pots. Smooth water, such as found in reflecting pools or water with a very fine spray, is considered fine texture. The texture affects the perception of distance and scale. To make a space feel larger, locate plants so that the fine texture are along. To make a space feel larger, locate plants so that the fine texture are along the outer perimeter. To make a space feel larger, locate plants so that the fine texture are along the outer perimeter. The medium textures are in the middle and the core textures are closer to the weaver. The small size of the fine texture recedes in the landscape and is perceived as being farther away. To, to make a space feel smaller, place the coarse texture along the outer perimeter and the fine texture closer to the weaver. The detail of the coarse texture makes the plants appear closer and makes the space feel smaller. The perceived texture of plant can also be changed with the distance from the plant. Plant that are coarse, plant that are co- Plants that are coarse close up can look the fine texture from distance. Bold color increase the contrast and make the texture appear coarser, while muted color can flatten the structure. Hardscape with a coarse texture such as very rough rock and bold, large timber tends to make all plant material appear more medium textured. The next element of landscape design is color. Color in plant materials and hardscape adds interest and variety to the landscape. Color is the most conspicuous element in the landscape and usually the focus of the most homeowner. However, it is also the most temporary element, usually lasting only a few weeks, a year for individual plants. The use of color is guided by color theory. The use of color is guided by color theory to create a color scheme. A simple description of color wheels include the three primary colors of red, blue, and yellow. The three secondary colors. A simple, descri- a simple description of the color wheel includes three primary colors of red, blue, and yellow, the three secondary colors of green, orange, and violet, and six tertiary colors such as red, orange. Color theory explains the relationship of colors to each other and how they should be used in a composition. Basic color schemes are monochromatic, analogous, and complementary. Color theory is very complex and very personal matter that expresses individual taste and feelings. A monochromatic scheme of color uses only one color. In landscaping, this usually means one color. In landscaping, this usually means one color besides the green color in the foliage. A green that is green depends upon more on the form and texture of the contrast and interest. One color can have a many light and dark variation which can add interest. An example of monochromatic scheme is showing in the image with pink mix in lily flower. An example of monochromatic scheme is showing in the image with pink mix in lily flower and orange mix in dahlia flower. Analogous, or also called as harmonious color schemes, are any 3 to 5 colors that are adjacent on the color wheel, such as red, red orange, orange, orange yellow, and yellow or blue, blue violet, and violet. The colors are related to each other because they typically include two primary color mixes to form a secondary and two tertiary colors, which means they share some common properties as we can see in this current image, the analogous schemes of the flowers. The third type of color schemes is complementary schemes. Complementary colors are those that are opposite to each other on the color wheel. They tend to have high contrast between them. The most common sets are violet and yellow, red and green, blue and orange. Complementary colors are often found naturally in the gardens. This particular image showing different complementary colors in the garden of different flowers. Colors have properties that can reflect emotions, spatials. Colors have properties that can affect emotions, spatial perception, light quality, balance, and emphasis. One property of color is described relative to temperature. Color appears to be cool or warm and can affect emotions or feelings. Cool colors tend to be calming and should be used in areas for relaxation and serenity. Warm colors tend to be more exciting and should be used in areas for entertaining and parties. The temperature of color can also affect the perception of distance. Cool colors tend to recede and are perceived as being farther away, making a space feel larger. Warm colors tend to advance and are perceived as being closer, making a space feel smaller. Color can also be used to capture attention and direct views. Focal points can be created with bright colors, for example, bright yellow, which has the highest intensity and also has a high contrast with all other colors and should be used sparingly. A small amount of intense color has a much visual weight as a large amount of more subdued or weaker color. Color scheme in the garden can change with the season. Color scheme in the garden can change with the season. Summer colors are usually more varied and bright with more flower, while winter colors tend to be monochromatic and darker with more foliage. Color is also affected by light quality, which changes with the time of day and time of year. Brighter, more intense Brighter, more intense summer sun makes colors appears more saturated and intense, while filtered light of winter makes color appears more subdued. When choosing a color scheme, consideration should be given to the time of day the yard will be used. Because color is temporary, it should be used to highlight more enduring elements such as texture and form. A color study on a plan view is helpful for making color choices. Color schemes are drawn on the plan to show amount the proposed location of various colors. The next element of the landscape design is visual height. Visual height is the concept that combination of certain features have more importance in the composition based on mass and contrast. Some areas of a composition are more noticeable and memorable, while other fade into the background. This does not mean that the background features are this does not mean that the background features are unimportant. They create a cohesive look by linking together features of high visual weight, and they provide a resting place for the eye. A composition where all the features have high visual weight often looks chaotic because the eye tends to bounce between the features. High visual weight usually comes from a group of plants with one or few of the following characteristics like upright or unusual forms, larger size, bright color, bold texture, and diagonal lines like showing in the current image. While low visual weight is found in low horizontal line, prostrate or low forms, fine texture, and subdued or dull colors that presented showing next to the high visual weight plants. The next elements of the landscape design is space. Space is either positive or negative escape. Space either positive or negative in landscape design. A powerful partnership in landscape design, just like art, understanding the relationship between positive space and negative space. It is crucial for creating balanced and visually appealing compositions. Let's break down the each concept. Positive space represent the tangible elements in landscape such as plants, trees, rocks, water features, buildings, and even yourself. These are the focal points that draw your eye and define the intended use of space, like blooming rosebush, a winding pathway, a majestic oak tree. While the, while the negative space refer to the empty areas surrounding the positive elements, like in the particular uh, negative space refer to the empty areas surrounding the positive elements. This space is usually important as it provides balance, rest for the eye, and allow the positive elements to stand out. An example of it like lawn, the sky above, and a pathway between flower beds. Next important elements is scale. Good proportion and scales have no hard and fast rules. Generally speaking, it is a matter of how it does look like. Scales usually bears reference to the size of a thing or object that appears to have a pleasing relationship to the other things or to the design as a whole. It essentially relates to the some finite measures of universal application or standard of known dimension. The size refers to the definite measurements, while scale describes the size relationship between adjacent objects. The size of planting and building compared to human scale must be considered. As in this current image, we can see large scale plants in comparison to house, and how a normal scale plants look like in comparison to house, and how a small scale create a scenery in comparison to houses. The last element of the landscape design is pattern. Pattern is repeated combinations of line, form, color, texture, and space. They may be variegated or they have a used more than once. In this particular image, we can see there is a creation of pattern by concretes or gar. In this image, we can see there is a creating of a pattern with the use of concrete. That's all for the today's class. In the next, we will discuss about the principles of landscape designing and gardening. Thank you.